Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a very special broadcast of Sucker for Synth. Today, I am joined by none other than Confrontational. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for doing this.
As far as what exactly inspires you as far as musicians and films? Who do you draw a lot of inspiration from?
It's so wide. I would say first and foremost, I started out by listening to Michael Jackson as a kid, and his love for cinema is something that informed his own music. After that, it's been like encompassing like everything from soundtracks to movies, from things that I listened to on the radio. The very beginning of my understanding of what music was, I was sort of just taking in everything I could. So really, it's really wide. It goes from thrash metal like Sadus, Creator, Testament, Prong, to more dark wave acts like the Sisters of Mercy, obscure stuff from England, Killing Joke, Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry, a lot of stuff that comes from, the 80s. And as far as movies go, that's really a big one because John Carpenter, of course, is like that moment where I was like, oh my god, this guy is an incredible director and he does his own soundtracks, and that was mind blowing. When I found out about him, I was like 13, 14 years old, and I was like floored, really. And of course, George Romero, William Friedkin, Michael Mann, David Lynch, David Cronenberg, the whole deal, man.
Right, and you mentioned George Romero. I read somewhere that after you saw Dawn of the Dead for the first time, you actually tried to make a zombie movie yourself. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I was a kid. I was 14 years old, and I was just blown away. Really, George Romero was like, he was the one that kind of taught me this idea that it doesn't matter wherever you are, you can do your own thing. He stuck to his own guns. He stayed in Pittsburgh. He didn't want to, move on to Hollywood and get that broader career sort of environment. And that really inspired me. That's like one of those things that come up in your head when you're a teen. So I wrote this script, and I had this thing that was like pretty much done, and I started to think about the scenes in my head. So I come up with this sort of soundtrack that I wanted to do, and then that's how I started to get into the recording process with this classmate friend of mine. His name is Paulo Varjo. I love that guy, and that's how everything started for me. I didn't know how to play real music. I just had a lousy keyboard, so I would show him some parts, and we came up with the soundtrack. Actually, we did it on a computer. This was around 1998, so we were using really primitive stuff. I think it was called Fast Tracker, the program we were using. I still have that cassette. The thing was called Under Siege. Yeah, it's trippy. I don't know. It's like kind of like The Goonies meets George Romero, and yeah, it's weird. I was 14. I still like the idea for it, but I don't know. I've been trying to pitch it to some people into do-it-yourself video game skills, that kind of stuff, like 16-beat people, and that would be something that would be cool, to turn into a old school video game kind of thing. But I'm not sure if that's ever gonna happen.
Going back a little bit, after you did you tried making the soundtrack with your friend for the movie, you formed your
Yeah,
first band, Dahlia Indica, with a friend, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Elisabetta Petrito.
yeah, man. You did your research. That's awesome.
Thank you. How did the two of you meet, and what was that experience like?
We started out around 1999. I was around 17 at the time, and I just picked up the guitar. So it was really primitive because I'm mainly self-taught, and at the very beginning, I just had this very limited palette of things where I would draw inspiration from, which was, the same stuff over and over and again, like dark movies and dark music, and really it was like a blend of that, and it was really inspired by a soundtrack by a video game, Silent Hill. The soundtrack by Akira Yamaoka is one of those really inspiring things for me. We just started to come up with the songs, and just started to play concerts around, but it was clear that there was nothing like an audience around here, here in Sardinia. And so we just kept going, but it didn't really turn out into what we wanted to do, which was like playing live as much as possible. And so we kept going, and we amassed a bunch of songs, and eventually we had this period of time where we just came up with like a collection of what we thought was the best stuff we did, and we did this album that came out in 2009, so like 10 years after the formation of the band, and the album was called Chronicles of Nowhere. And we had Darren Travis from Sadis guesting on that for 2 tracks and vocals, and took us 2 years to record the album, and it was insane. So after that I was like blasted, and I didn't want to touch it anymore, so we just stopped playing. But I'm still in great terms with Elisabetta. She's cool.
After that band ended and before you started to do the Confrontational act, were you in any other bands?
Yeah, I had this other thing that I started out around 2005-6-ish, and it was called Recordings of the Flesh, shortened as Rex of the Flesh. And this thing was more of a noise rock output kind of thing, like kind of a cross between Sonic Youth, Killing Joke, Queens of the Stone Age, and Placebo. And I was always doing most of the songwriting, actually pretty much 90% of it, and trying to find people to play with. It had a little more of an audience around here, which is why we also went on to play a bunch of shows. We did what we could, but locally it was very hard, so eventually I resigned to play with a revolving door kind of lineup, and which is how I ended up playing with on the first album. There's a Spanish drummer, a bass player from Minneapolis, a very good friend of mine named Justin Wood. And then the second album we did in Prague, when I was working in the same studio where Killing Joke were recording their Absolute Descent album. This was in Prague, Czech Republic, 2009. And we had a Czech drummer for that, which is very cool. And then we did the last album here in Sardinia in 2012. And after that, it just didn't work out, so I moved on.
And moving on to now, under Confrontational, how did you come up with the name for that? It's very direct and to the point. What made you decide to pick that moniker?
It's really towards the end of the band, Rex of the Flesh. We had this period of time where with the other persons that I was playing with, they had a problem with how I saw most of things as far as the direction I wanted to go in. I wanted to be more active online. I wanted to do more videos and keep recording. And that last lineup we had, they were all from Sardinia, and it was just not working. So we had this one last session where we tried to work it out. I was trying to be making it happen, just making it work. But they were like taking it in stride and not really trying to work together. So what I came up right after that was like they faced me as if I were confrontational, as if it was a bad thing. And I'm like, in my mind, when you confront somebody, it really doesn't have to be negative at all. It should be a positive thing. And I thought like, maybe from now on I want to be confrontational, and I want it to be my own way of confronting things, situations, and persons.
How did you first hear about the retrowave scene?
That's interesting. That's very interesting. 2014, I quit my regular job to focus on music, and I wrote like, I don't know, something like 2 albums worth of material, like demos. And I was looking for people to play with all over the world. So I was looking for somebody who would play synth, like not the genre, but like actually the instrument, because I wanted to try and see if I could find somebody that I could swap ideas with. And I just started to look everywhere around the web for hashtag synth. And so like I was on Twitter and Facebook, and I started to get the sort of same bands over and over, and I was like, okay, what is this? And I already had a number of songs, but I wasn't really happy with not happy, but it was like it was weird. It was like a transitional period, and I was try to understand what I really wanted to go for. And just as I was starting to write the first EP, Down With You, I came across Carpenter Brute and Dance with the Dead. And this was late 2014. And I was like, wow, these guys are doing something that sounds like what I would like to go for. That really blew me away. And then after that, it just went on by itself. So I would say like late 2014.
Speaking of your first EP, Done With You, tells the story of someone seeking revenge after being betrayed by someone close or loved one. And I noticed at the bottom on the cover it says based on a true story. Is that just for aesthetic of the album, or was that you getting some sort of frustrations out?
Oh, well, I decided to make it really personal. And there's this album by Prong called Rude Awakening. Prong are one of my ultimate fave bands, and Tommy Victor, the main songwriter and guitar player singer, he had this approach where it was just let it all through, and it was like a kind of a stream of consciousness, and that really influenced me growing up. And so I just said, okay, let's just go for this and just make it like that. And so in a way, it's kind of a cross between something mythical, something like a dream state, and something that draws inspiration from real stuff that's happened to me. It's in between. There's a lot of aesthetic in there too, I would say.
You've collaborated with Cody Carpenter, son of the John Carpenter, on songs like To Live and Die in the Air and Crimson Curtains. How did that relationship form?
Yeah, Cody is mind-blowing, man. The whole thing just really blew me away. I was aware that he was out there doing music because around early 2000-ish, I was checking out the John Carpenter Masters of Horror episodes where Cody did the scores, and I remember being really, really impressed with what he would do. So it was always there in the back of my mind. I would love to know what this guy's up to right now. And so I just set out to look him out online, and then I found out his project, Ludrum, and I just fell in love with it. And he seemed to be a very approachable kind of person. At the time, I was collaborating with a webzine called neonvice.com, and I was doing interviews and putting together stuff. And one of the persons that I wanted to interview was Cody, so we did this interview, and it was amazing to talk to. And so right after that, I picked it up. This was during the Dance of Shadows sessions, and I came up with the song eventually that I felt could be something that he might like. So I sent it over to him. I was like, what do you think of the song? And do you think you might be into doing something together? And it was very natural. He really liked it, and we picked it up from there. And we've been in touch ever since, regularly. And he's really a gentleman. He's a really, really cool guy. The same thing for Crimson Curtains, pretty much. This was like a natural process, and it was mind-blowing to meet him in person in London last year for the John Carpenter show on Halloween. I flew there, and it was totally surreal, man. Really, really amazing to meet him in person, and he even introduced me to his father. It was kind of crazy.
What was that experience like, meeting John Carpenter? Like, were you nervous at all? Were you able to keep cool?
Oh, well, I was in the front row, really in front of Cody and John for the whole show, and I was just, the English people were like really taking it like, oh, this is cool, and they were clapping and screaming like maniacs, but they were mostly still, and I'm this Italian dude that's just in front of his all-time hero, and I was just thrashing. So he saw me like really having a good time, and then right afterwards I got together with Cody, and the first thing Mr. Carpenter said was like, "I saw you back there thrashing, man. That was so cool." And I was like, "Whoa!" I was stunned, really. So it was amazing, and we had a really brief chat, and then we had a longer chat with Cody. I was really mind blown. That's really the only thing that I can think of is like, I still cannot believe about that.
So moving on to A Dance of Shadows. Personally, that was one of my favorite albums, 2015. How did you come up with the idea for that?
Again, it was really natural. 2015 was this moment where I was just pushing as much as possible in terms of dedication as far as time goes. I was breathing music literally 24/7, and right after the Down With You sessions were completed, I kept coming up with stuff, and just like that, it flew into this thing, this bigger thing, and I think Cody's input was really what made it turn into something like a full-length experience for me. I was like, okay, this is it. I gotta make it work just like that, and right after that, it turned into this thing by itself. It's like I was a conduit of sorts. I know it's gonna sound weird, but it's like I wanted to pay a tribute to my town, my hometown, which is why on the artwork, all the pictures inside are actual pictures that I took from my surroundings. And also the video we did for To Live and Die on the Air was done all here. It's something that, in a way, I feel like the surroundings I'm in kind of talked me into. I have the studio, which is in my house in the basement, and the basement is on top of this hill, which is where my house is, and the hill is part of this bigger complex, which is a huge necropolis that dates back to Punic Age, which is like thousands of years before Christ. So, you know, a necropolis is like this huge burial ground. And that's really where everything started to like talk to me in a way. I know it's weird, but it felt like that. Especially when you're coming up with something like music, if you open up yourself to what is there, you can start to feel something, and if you just let it flow, that's what happens. It was really spontaneous, and I was inspired by stuff that's happened to me, and it's like a continuation of the Down With You method, really, and kind of like a stream of consciousness thing. The most incredible example of this is Like a Curse, which really it just was I don't know, it exploded into my head after this nightmare I had. And I woke up one morning, I had this horrible nightmare. I was like, what the hell? And I just got to the recording studio, and everything just started to flow out of myself, like lyrics and music. It was really remarkable.
On a side note, I kind of saw a correlation between two things. The cover art for A Dance of Shadows is really reminiscent of the poster for the Bela Lugosi film from 1932, White Zombie. Did you draw any inspiration from that by any chance?
Well, I actually don't know about that poster you just mentioned. I would love to check it out, but I can tell you this. Branka Studio from Barcelona did the artwork, and that artwork I came upon. It was already done. I was scrolling on Instagram around 2015, struggling for ideas for the cover because the album was getting done quickly, and I didn't have a cover, and so there was this guy, Branka Studio, that I got on Instagram, and I was like, my gosh, this guy's incredible. And I started scrolling all of his pictures one day, and like at the very bottom, there was that poster he did, but it didn't have an attachment to any band of sorts. It was like this poster he did, and I was like, oh, wait a second, that's it. So I just wrote to him, and and got into the licensing thing, and we started to work together after that. I don't know of a direct White Zombie poster correlation, but I can tell you that he was surely inspired by Rosemary's Baby's poster.
I just learned this the other day that Dance of Shadows, Kingdom of Night are part of a trilogy, and the Done With You EP serves as a sort of prologue. Is that right? Are
Right.
you?
Yeah. That's where I'm at right now. And like I said, it came together, and I felt like these songs were all connected. And on Kingdom of Night, I'm kind of pushing the envelope a little bit because I think the album is a little bit more cryptic in terms of lyrical content, and I like that aspect. Like you keep going in a certain direction, but not necessarily doing the same thing over and over again. And this is what made me realize there was more to say about the story, and that's why I realized, okay, there's gonna be a third album, and these three things are all going to be together.
And also on Kingdom of Night, there's a song called Tanit, and I looked it up afterwards. That's apparently a goddess of the moon. Is that how did you first hear about something like that?
See, that's the interesting part. When I realized, at first it was like a kind of a subconscious thing about my surroundings, the necropolis thing around my house. By the way, this is the largest necropolis in the Mediterranean Sea. This is huge, and it's really where I'm standing right now. And I started to more consciously get into this. I was always fascinated with this place for a number of reasons. But like during the Kingdom of Night sessions, I really wanted to dig deep into this. So I started to do research. And the sign of Tanit, which is a Phoenician goddess that is derived from an Egyptian goddess. The Egyptian goddess is named Neith, is sort of a myth that revolves around the creation of the whole universe. And Tanit is basically another name for Neith. And there was an inscription on the Temple of Tanit, which I wanted to use on the artwork for the album. And this inscription was pretty much summarized by the symbol, which is a circle and a triangle with a stick in between of them, which is kind of like the Ankh, the Egyptian symbol for life, with a triangle underneath. And this is the symbol that was found on most of the tombs in this necropolis, right by my house. I started to experience some sort of coincidences during my research because while doing this, I was delving into movies by Italian directors like Pupi Avati, who is the director that did The House with Laughing Windows, and Zeder, and Lucio Fulci, of course, and especially in Avati, I could find that there was a sort of connection in his themes with the Tanit stuff, and this is all interconnected. This comes very explicitly said into two movies by Avati explicitly. One is called Zeder from 1982-3, and the other is like a TV series that they did just for Italy that was called Voci Notturne, which means nocturnal voices. And I just started to notice all these coincidences pointing in the same direction, and this really influenced the songwriting a lot. So Tanit, the song, is a tribute to that presence. I think that turned out great, and this all is also the reason why I eventually wanted to work with Ugo Laurenti, who did the choirs and lead synth on Midnight Wings. He's the guy who did the soundtrack to the TV series that Pupi Avati did, Nocturnal Voices. So it all came together in a very special way, and I'm really glad about this.
Are you working on the final chapter of your trilogy now, or are you still taking a break after Kingdom of Night?
There's like no breaks from songwriting for me, which is kind of taking its toll. In a way, it's getting hard, like I told you at the very beginning, to balance everything. But I'm trying to give priority to songwriting because I feel really inspired by the whole concept. And as of now, I have something like, I want to say like 15 songs written already. But it's gonna, and these were all done explicitly for this album. But I need more time to get down to 9 songs. This one is also gonna be 9 songs, and right now I'm in this period of time where I'm just taking my time to make sure that the songs that eventually are going to end up on the album will be the best ones possible.
In your experience, do you find it easier to advance a story that you're trying to tell with instrumental songs or songs with vocals?
There's a balance there. Really, it's sometimes I look at the quote unquote discussions there are online about, oh, synthwave is just instrumental, or oh no, synthwave has to have vocals. I think there's a balance in there, and I'm really comfortable with both. I have a slight preference for the vocal stuff, which is also why there's usually more vocal songs in my albums. But to be honest, both are perfectly reasonable. So I think if you can manage to do both and make it work for you, that's cool.
Lastly, recently over in America, we've seen guys like Carpenter Brute and Perturbator making their way to America for the American tours. Do you have any plans in the near future to go on tour?
Well, I would really love to. I would really, really love to. And in fact, I've been in touch with a few people here and there. The thing is, being in Sardinia, everything gets a little more complicated because right now I'm working with a drummer from Spain, and his name is Juan. And we played a show here in Sardinia to test things out, and it's been going really good. Just myself and Juan. What I would like to do is try and get this on the road in Europe first. And it's something that I'm trying to work on right now. But like I told you, right now the priority is still getting the third chapter done. So I'm trying to see if in all this mess I can find a way to put together a tour of Europe. I would love to play in France more. The French people were absolutely insane each time we played the Scintilla Festival. It was surreal. And last year we got to meet with the Dance with the Dead guys, Tony and Justin, and that was so cool. And they were like, dude, you gotta get yourself out there. So I'm trying to put this whole thing in motion here first, and then eventually we'll go there. I would love to do that. I have family and friends in the U.S., and there's nothing that I'd like more, really.
All right, that does it for me. Do you have anything you want to say for final words or anything to the people out there?
Well, first of all, it's been a huge pleasure to do this. It's really awesome to talk to you, and I'm really impressed by the research. And then secondly, I'm honored by your interest and that you took the time to listen to all this. I'm really, really touched, and I appreciate a lot.
And we appreciate you for coming on here, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thanks so much, man. You can find me online, confrontational.net, and all the social networks are linked there. So I hope to see you out there.
All right, thanks again. Confrontational, everyone.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.